Julian Hayes adjusted his silk tie as he stepped through the revolving doors of Mercy Heart Hospital on a crisp autumn morning. At 34 years old, he had built Hayes Technologies from a college startup into a billion-dollar empire that revolutionized cloud computing. His annual health screening was one of the few appointments he never missed, mostly because his board of directors insisted their golden boy stay in peak condition. The executive wing of the hospital felt more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Soft classical music played through hidden speakers, and the waiting area featured leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Julian settled into one, scrolling through his tablet as he reviewed the latest acquisition proposal. Numbers and projections filled the screen, but they could not fill the hollow space that had lived in his chest for the past 9 months. He had tried everything to forget Natalie Brooks. 80-hour work weeks, extreme mountain climbing in Nepal, even a brief and disastrous attempt at dating a supermodel his publicist thought would be good for his image. Nothing worked. Her laugh still echoed in his quiet moments. The way she used to trace patterns on his chest while they talked about everything and nothing haunted him in the early morning hours when sleep refused to come. The call that shattered normalcy. Dr. Patricia Miller greeted him with her usual professional warmth. The examination proceeded smoothly until the final blood pressure reading made her frown slightly. Julian noticed but said nothing. He knew what she would say. Stress, overwork, the same lecture he heard every year and promptly ignored. As he buttoned his custom shirt, the hospital intercom crackled to life with an urgency that made everyone in the room freeze. Code emergency, labor and delivery unit. Critical need for AB-negative blood type. Any available AB-negative donors report to 4th floor immediately. This is an urgent request. Mother and infants in critical condition. Dr. Miller glanced at his chart, her eyes widening slightly. You are AB negative, correct? That is incredibly rare. Less than 1% of the population. Something cold twisted in Julian's stomach. AB negative. He had been a regular donor since his university days, partly because his blood could help almost anyone, partly because it was one of the few ways his privilege could do immediate, tangible good in the world. 4th floor, he said quietly, already moving toward the door. How do I get there? He did not wait for directions. His feet carried him to the elevator with a speed that surprised him. The numbers climbed slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. His reflection stared back from the polished doors, a man who looked successful but felt increasingly hollow. Dark hair perfectly styled, sharp jawline that magazines called distinguished, eyes that had been described as intense but which his mother once called lonely. Into the storm. The maternity ward was controlled chaos. Nurses in colorful scrubs moved with practiced efficiency between rooms. Monitors beeped steady rhythms. New fathers paced in waiting areas while grandparents clutched flowers and balloons. Life beginning, families forming, joy and terror mixing in equal measure. Julian approached the central station where a nurse with kind eyes and gray hair looked up from her computer screen. I am here for the AB-negative donation, he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded when his heart was hammering against his ribs. Relief flooded her features. Thank heavens. Room 418. The mother went into early labor with twins. There are complications. We need you standing by in case the babies need immediate transfusions. Twins. The word echoed in his mind as he followed her down the corridor. AB-negative blood was so rare that the odds of this being random felt astronomical. But coincidences happened. The world was full of unlikely events. He was simply here to help, nothing more. Except the nurse was not leading him to a donation room. She was heading straight toward a delivery suite where urgent voices filtered through partially open doors. Medical equipment beeped and whirred. Someone was giving calm, firm instructions about breathing and pushing. Wait, Julian started to say, but the nurse had already pushed through the door, and momentum carried him inside. The moment everything stopped. The delivery room was a symphony of organized urgency. Machines tracked vital signs in glowing numbers Julian could not interpret. A surgical team in blue scrubs surrounded the bed, their movements precise and coordinated. And in the center of it all, fighting to bring new life into the world, was Natalie Brooks. Even in the throes of labor, even with her face twisted in pain and effort, she was breathtaking. Her dark curls were pulled back under a surgical cap, sweat glistened on her brown skin, and her eyes were squeezed shut as she followed the doctor's instructions to push. She wore a hospital gown that seemed too fragile for the monumental task her body was performing. Julian felt the world tilt on its axis. 9 months. The math was simple, devastating, undeniable. 9 months since the night he had walked away from the best thing in his life because he was terrified of the vulnerability love demanded. 9 months since she had sat on his couch, hand pressed to her stomach in a gesture he had been too panicked to understand, trying to tell him something important while he built walls and burned bridges. 9 months since he told the woman he loved that their relationship was never meant to be serious, that she was getting too attached, that he was not the settling down type. He had watched her face crumble, watched hope die in those beautiful eyes, and told himself he was doing the right thing. "One more push, Natalie," the doctor encouraged. "Your first baby is almost here." Your first baby. Twins. His mind struggled to process the reality unfolding before him. Natalie's eyes opened. In the brief moment before another contraction gripped her, her gaze swept the room and landed directly on Julian standing frozen near the doorway. Time stopped. Everything stopped. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by shock so profound it seemed to steal her breath. Then came something Julian had never seen in her eyes before. Pure, blazing fury that burned hotter than any pain labor could bring. "No," she gasped, her voice cutting through the medical chatter like breaking glass. "No. Get him out. Get him out right now." 9 months earlier, the annual fundraising gala at Mercy Heart Hospital sparkled with wealth and pretense. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across Seattle's elite as they sipped expensive champagne and competed to see whose charitable donation would earn the most social media attention. Julian Hayes stood near the silent auction display, contemplating a ski trip to Aspen he had no intention of bidding on, when fate intervened in the form of spilled wine. A waiter carrying a tray of red wine glasses collided with a woman in pale blue scrubs who was clearly trying to navigate through the crowd without being noticed. The crash echoed across the marble floor, and deep crimson wine splashed across the front of her uniform like a wound. She stood frozen in the center of the wreckage, surrounded by shattered crystal and the judgmental stares of people who measured worth in dollar signs. Julian moved without thinking. "Completely my fault," he announced loud enough for the nearby donors to hear. "I stepped backward without looking." Terrible spatial awareness for someone who designs technology. The woman looked up at him with eyes the color of warm honey, surprise and gratitude playing across her features. She was beautiful in a way that made his carefully constructed walls crack just slightly. Natural, genuine, with a smile that seemed to light up something inside him that had been dark for too long. "You do not have to cover for me," she said softly, though her voice carried strength beneath the embarrassment. "I was rushing and not paying attention." Natalie Brooks, she introduced herself, extending a hand that was steady despite the wine dripping from her scrubs. "Pediatric intensive care nurse. I was trying to grab something from my locker before my shift starts." "Julian Hayes," he replied, taking her hand and feeling a jolt of connection that had nothing to do with static electricity. "Professional party attendee and apparently a traffic hazard." Her laugh was genuine and musical, completely different from the practiced social sounds filling the ballroom. "Are you really going to take responsibility for my clumsiness?" "Absolutely. I have a reputation to maintain as Seattle's most philanthropically clumsy billionaire." That night should have ended with polite goodbyes and separate lives continuing on their predetermined paths. Instead, Julian found himself offering to buy Natalie coffee in the hospital cafeteria while she waited for a clean uniform. One coffee became 3 hours of conversation that flowed easier than anything in his carefully controlled life. She told him about growing up in a small town in Georgia, how she put herself through nursing school working 3 jobs, about the children she cared for who fought battles that would break most adults. He found himself sharing things he never discussed at board meetings or business dinners. His fear of never being enough despite all his success, the loneliness of building an empire that felt increasingly hollow, the way he sometimes sat in his penthouse overlooking the city and felt more isolated than he ever had living in a college dormitory. "You know what I think?" Natalie said, stirring her 3rd cup of terrible hospital coffee. "I think you are so busy being Julian Hayes the billionaire that you forgot how to be just Julian." No one had ever said anything like that to him before. No one had ever looked past the success and status to see the person underneath. Their relationship grew in stolen moments between her 12-hour shifts and his endless business commitments. Late-night dinners in quiet restaurants where no one recognized him. Weekend mornings in her modest apartment where she made pancakes and he did the dishes. Lazy evenings on her couch where they watched old movies and she fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. Natalie never asked him for anything. She did not want access to his wealth or connections. She did not photograph their relationship for social media or hint at expensive gifts. She just wanted him. The real him. The man who made terrible jokes and burned toast and sometimes woke up from nightmares about failing everyone who depended on him. The confession he could not hear. 6 months into their relationship, Julian started feeling something that terrified him more than any hostile corporate takeover or market crash. He was happy. Genuinely, deeply, vulnerably happy. And with that happiness came crushing fear. Fear that it would end, that he would lose her, that this perfect thing would shatter and leave him more broken than before. So he did what wounded people do when they are scared. He started building walls. Working later hours, canceling dates at the last minute, creating distance before she could hurt him by leaving first. On a rainy Thursday evening, Natalie came to his penthouse apartment. She had texted saying they needed to talk, that she had something important to tell him. Julian remembered that night with painful clarity. The way the city lights reflected in the rain-streaked windows. How nervous she looked, her hands twisting together as she sat on his leather couch. The way she kept touching her stomach, a gesture he was too lost in his own panic to recognize. "Julian," she started, her voice gentle but determined. "These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. You have shown me a side of yourself that I do not think many people get to see. The real you, not the magazine cover version." His chest tightened. This was it. This was where she would tell him she was falling in love with him, where she would want promises and commitments and a future. Where she would ask for more than he knew how to give without destroying himself in the process. "We need to talk about where this is going," she continued, her hand resting on her stomach again. "Because there is something you need to know. Something that changes everything." "Julian, I am." "This is getting too serious," he interrupted, the words leaving his mouth before his brain fully processed them. Self-preservation overriding everything else. "I think we need to take a step back. I never intended for this to become so complicated." The color drained from Natalie's face. Her hand fell away from her stomach. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I care about you, but I am not the relationship type. I thought you understood that. I thought we were both clear this was casual, temporary. I have my company to focus on. You have your career. Maybe we should end this before someone gets hurt." The lie tasted like ash in his mouth even as he spoke it. He could see the exact moment her heart broke, watch hope and joy die in those beautiful eyes he had grown to love more than his next breath. "Before someone gets hurt," she repeated softly, standing up on shaky legs. "I think we are past that point, Julian. Natalie, please understand. This is not about you. You are amazing. Any man would be lucky to have you. I am just not ready for something this intense. Maybe someday, but not now. She looked at him for a long moment, her hand pressed against her stomach one final time. There is something you should know, she started again. Please do not make this harder than it already is, Julian said, unable to meet her eyes. I think it is better if we make a clean break. No dragging this out. Natalie stood there in his expensive apartment, surrounded by the trappings of his success, and Julian watched her make a decision. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and nodded once. You are absolutely right, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. This was a mistake. I misunderstood what we were. Thank you for being honest before I got even more attached. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle, and looked back at him one last time. I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for, Julian. I really do. But I will not be waiting around when you finally figure out that running from happiness is not the same as protecting yourself from pain. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that echoed louder than any slam could have. Julian stood in his empty penthouse, surrounded by everything he had built and nothing that mattered, and told himself he had made the right choice. He had protected himself. Protected her. Saved them both from eventual disappointment and heartbreak. He was a fool. The weight of regret. The days after Natalie left blurred together in a haze of work and regret. Julian threw himself into a major acquisition deal, spending 18 hours a day in meetings and negotiations. He told himself the hollow ache in his chest was just stress, that the way food lost all taste was because he was eating too many working lunches, that he woke up reaching for her in his empty bed because he was overtired. His assistant noticed he had lost weight. His business partner commented that he seemed distracted during board meetings. His mother called from Florida and asked why he sounded so sad during their weekly phone conversation. I am fine, he told everyone. Just busy with work. But he was not fine. He was the opposite of fine. He had destroyed the best thing in his life because he was too terrified to admit that loving someone meant risking the possibility of losing them. He tried to move on. Went on 3 dates his publicist arranged with women who looked perfect on paper but felt wrong in every way that mattered. None of them laughed at his jokes the way Natalie had. None of them saw past his wealth to the person underneath. None of them made him want to be better than he was. Now, 9 months later, standing in a delivery room watching the woman he loved give birth to children she had tried to tell him about, Julian understood the full weight of his cowardice. She had been trying to tell him she was pregnant. The hand on her stomach, the nervous determination, the need to talk about their future. She had been giving him a chance to step up, to be part of something miraculous. And he had thrown it away without even listening. Julian stood in the sterile hospital corridor, his back pressed against the cold wall as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Through the partially open door of room 418, he could hear everything. The medical team's calm instructions, Natalie's exhausted but determined efforts, and then the sound that shattered and rebuilt him simultaneously, the cry of his son entering the world. It is a boy, Dr. Patricia Chen announced with warmth in her voice. He is perfect, Natalie. Absolutely perfect. Julian's legs nearly gave out. A son. He had a son. A tiny human being who existed because of one beautiful night 9 months ago when he and Natalie had stayed up until dawn talking about their dreams and fears, wrapped in sheets that smelled like her lavender shampoo. One more, Natalie, the doctor encouraged. Your daughter is ready to meet you. Daughter. The word hit him like a physical force. Twin babies who would grow up without knowing their father because he had been too much of a coward to listen when their mother tried to tell him they existed. The second cry joined the first, and Julian felt tears streaming down his face for the first time since his grandmother's funeral 15 years ago. 2 perfect lives beginning just beyond the door, and he was standing outside like a stranger because that was exactly what he was to them. Security guards stood nearby, watching him with wary expressions. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, stepped closer. You should leave, sir, he said gently. The mother was very clear about not wanting you here. We need to respect her wishes. Julian nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He was turning to go when Dr. Chen emerged from the delivery room, pulling off her surgical gloves. She studied him with sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. "You are the father," she said. It was not a question. "I did not know," Julian managed to say. "She tried to tell me, and I walked away. I told her we were getting too serious, that I needed space. I never gave her the chance to finish what she was trying to say." Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "That was foolish of you. I know. I know that now. Can you tell me if they are okay? Are Natalie and the babies healthy?" "Mother and babies are stable. The twins were born at 36 weeks, which is early but not dangerously so. Your son weighs 5 pounds 3 ounces. Your daughter is 5 pounds even. They will need monitoring in the neonatal unit for a few days, but their vital signs are strong." Julian closed his eyes, relief washing over him. "Thank you. Can I see them? Just for a moment?" "That decision belongs to their mother," Dr. Chen said firmly. "Right now, she needs rest and bonding time with her children. She has been through a traumatic experience, and your presence clearly causes her distress." "I understand. Can you at least tell her something for me?" The doctor waited, her expression neutral but not unkind. "Tell her I am not going anywhere. Tell her I know I do not deserve forgiveness or a second chance, but I am going to spend every day proving that I have changed. Tell her those babies will know their father if it is the last thing I do in this life." The next morning, Julian returned to the hospital with his arms full of flowers, balloons, and every parenting book the bookstore had in stock. The nurse at the maternity ward station looked at him with sympathy and something that might have been pity. "Mr. Hayes," she said gently. "Miss Brooks has left instructions that you are not to be given any information about her or the babies. Patient privacy laws mean we have to honor that request." "I understand. Can you at least make sure she gets these?" He gestured to the flowers. "And tell her I will be in the waiting room if she changes her mind." He spent 6 hours in that waiting room, watching other families come and go with new babies. Grandparents cooing over tiny wrapped bundles. Siblings meeting their new brothers and sisters for the first time. Joy and love filling every corner of the space while Julian sat alone with his regrets. On the third day, Natalie's best friend Keisha arrived at the hospital and found Julian still camped in the waiting room, his expensive suit rumpled from sleeping in a chair. "You have some nerve showing up here," Keisha said, her voice cold enough to frost glass. "Do you have any idea what you put her through? She spent 2 months trying to reach you after you dumped her. She left voicemails, sent emails, even showed up at your office. Your assistant turned her away every single time." Julian felt sick. "I did not know. I told my team I needed space after the breakup. I was trying to move on. I did not realize she was trying to contact me." "She was trying to tell you that you were going to be a father," Keisha said, her eyes blazing with protective fury. "She was terrified and alone and desperately needed you to step up. Instead, you made her feel like she was some clingy ex who could not take a hint." "How can I fix this?" Julian asked, his voice breaking. "Tell me how to make this right." Keisha studied him for a long moment. "You cannot fix 9 months of abandonment with flowers and pretty words. You want to prove you have changed? Then prove it. Show up every single day. Be consistent. Be reliable. Be everything you were not when she needed you most. And understand that she might never forgive you. You have to be okay with loving those babies even if their mother never lets you back into her heart. Small steps and grand gestures." Julian took Keisha's advice to heart. Every morning, he showed up at the hospital before visiting hours started. He learned the names of every nurse on the maternity ward. He donated funds to upgrade the neonatal intensive care unit where his son and daughter were being monitored. He did not ask to see Natalie or the babies. He simply made sure everyone knew he was there, present and committed. On day 5, a nurse named Susan approached him in the waiting room. "Miss Brooks says you can see the babies for 10 minutes. Through the viewing window only. Do not ask for more than she is willing to give." Julian followed Susan to the neonatal unit, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his chest. Through the glass, he saw them. His son and daughter lay in side-by-side incubators, tiny and perfect and so fragile-looking that fear gripped his throat. His son had dark hair like Natalie and a serious expression even in sleep. His daughter was smaller, with delicate features and fingers that grasped at nothing. They were the most beautiful things Julian had ever seen. "Their names are Joshua and Grace," Susan said softly. "Miss Brooks chose them. Joshua means, God is salvation. Grace means, blessing. She says they saved her during the hardest months of her life." Julian pressed his hand against the glass, tears streaming freely down his face. "Joshua and Grace," he whispered. "I promise you both, I will be worthy of you. I will spend the rest of my life proving it." Over the next week, Julian's daily presence became routine. He set up a trust fund for the twins' education. He bought a house 3 blocks from Natalie's apartment building, modest by his standards but chosen specifically for its proximity to his children. He hired a family lawyer not to fight for custody but to ensure child support payments that would guarantee Natalie never had to worry about money again. On day 12, Natalie agreed to see him. She sat in her hospital room wearing comfortable clothes, her hair pulled back, looking exhausted and beautiful and so guarded that it broke his heart all over again. "You need to understand something," she said before he could speak. "I did not keep the pregnancy from you out of spite. I tried everything to tell you. Your assistant, your office, emails that went unanswered. Eventually, I realized you did not want to hear from me. That you meant what you said about us being a mistake. I was wrong," Julian said, his voice raw with emotion. "I was scared and stupid and I ran from the best thing that ever happened to me. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not expect you to give me another chance at being part of your life. But please, Natalie, let me be a father to Joshua and Grace. Let me show them that I can be better than the man who walked away from their mother." Natalie was quiet for a long time, studying his face with those honey-colored eyes that still made his breath catch. "Why should I believe you will not run again when things get difficult? Babies do not sleep through the night. Toddlers throw tantrums. Children get sick and scared and need constant attention. What happens when fatherhood is not convenient anymore? Then I will be there anyway," Julian said firmly. "I will be there for the sleepless nights and the tantrums and the fear. I will be there when it is hard and messy and nothing like the perfect family pictures in magazines. I will be there because they are mine and you are." He stopped, catching himself. "I am what?" Natalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are the woman I love," Julian said, the truth finally spoken out loud. "You have always been the woman I love. I was just too much of a coward to admit that loving you meant risking getting hurt. And I hurt you instead, which is the biggest regret of my life." The moment everything changed. 3 weeks after the twins were born, Natalie invited Julian to her apartment. Joshua and Grace were home from the hospital, healthy and growing stronger every day. Julian arrived to find Natalie surrounded by baby equipment she was trying to assemble, looking overwhelmed and exhausted. "I cannot figure out this stupid stroller," she admitted, her voice cracking with frustration and sleep deprivation. "The instructions are in 3 languages and none of them make sense." Julian knelt beside her on the living room floor. "Let me help." They worked together in silence, assembling the stroller piece by piece. When Grace started crying, Julian picked her up without being asked, holding her against his chest and swaying gently the way he had watched the nurses do in the hospital. She quieted almost immediately, her tiny hand curling around his finger. Natalie watched them, something shifting in her expression. "You have been coming every day for almost a month now. I told you I was not going anywhere. You bought a house 3 blocks away. So I can be close when you need me. When they need me. You set up trust funds that would let me quit working if I wanted to. You should not have to choose between your career and raising our children. You should have support. You should have help. You should have someone who shows up." Natalie was quiet for a moment, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I am so tired, Julian. I am so tired of being angry at you. I am tired of pretending I do not still love you. I am tired of doing this alone when you are standing right there wanting to help." Julian's heart stopped. "You still love me?" "I never stopped," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Even when I hated you, I still loved you. Even when I was furious and hurt and raising babies alone, part of me kept hoping you would figure it out and come back." "How pathetic is that?" "It is not pathetic," Julian said, carefully placing Grace in her bassinet before moving to sit beside Natalie. "It is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me. And I promise you, Natalie Brooks, I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of that love. I will be the partner you deserve and the father our children need. No more running. No more fear. Just us, building something real together." Natalie looked at him through her tears, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. She found only raw, honest love staring back at her. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Julian. Let us try this. One day at a time. But if you run again, I will not. I promise you, I will not." He pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried against his chest. Joshua began fussing in his bassinet, and they both moved to care for him together. 2 broken people, learning to build something whole. 2 tiny babies who had brought them back together. A family forming from the wreckage of mistakes and the power of second chances. Outside the window, Seattle's skyline glittered with possibility. Inside the modest apartment, Julian Hayes finally understood what true wealth looked like. It was not measured in dollars or status or magazine covers. It was measured in the weight of his daughter sleeping against his chest, the sound of his son's contented sighs, and the woman he loved learning to trust him again. Some promises took time to fulfill. Some wounds required patience to heal. But standing there with his family, Julian knew he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life. He had found home. The end.